Hey beautiful people, what is up and welcome back to my channel. I am Jamila and I love all things beauty. I love all things makeup, I love all things skincare, and I especially love sharing my tips and tricks for how to find high-end and luxury beauty products at bargain prices. If that sounds like something you're interested in, I would absolutely love if you would consider subscribing and joining the family. Alright, so today we are back with another rankings video, and today I'm going to be ranking the last 10, well not the last 10, but 10 eyeshadow palettes that I've tried. So I've actually been trying a ton of eyeshadow palettes. Some of these I've had for like 2 months now, and I've been meaning to do this ranking video for a very long time. So these have actually been sitting in a basket waiting to be ranked. Now I do have another set of 10 palettes that I'm working on to rank, so those will come after. So this doesn't include all of the palettes that I've been trying recently. It's literally 10 I've been trying for a while that I've been meaning to rank. So if I have done any sort of review or first impressions on these palettes, it will be linked down in the description box, so make sure you check that out. And let's just dive into these palettes. I've been trying so much eyeshadow. So much eyeshadow. It's been a lot. So I'm going to rank these, and these are going to go back into my main collection while I focus on some newer palettes. Alright, so coming in at number 10, we have the Pistacchio palette from BH Cosmetics. So this was one that I picked up at TJ Maxx for $7.99. I showed you guys that I picked up pretty much all of the palettes except for one at TJ. And this is the green palette. Now this is an absolutely beautiful color story. The shadows in here perform nice enough. And I was able to create a really pretty green look with this. And I really enjoyed this palette. But I will say it definitely was not my favorite out of all of the ones that I'm using here. And real quick disclaimer, I really enjoyed all of the palettes that are in this bucket, every single one. So there's nothing bad that I can say about this. It just kind of comes down to preference for the most part. So I love this palette. I actually really enjoy sort of these 4 shades here because they are definitely a little bit deeper, a little bit richer. These work really well too on my skin tone, so I had no issues with none of these shadows showing up on my skin tone at all. I will say that the mattes are definitely more powdery than some of the other mattes that I've used, and I did experience a lot of fallout when I used this palette, but at the end of the day I created a really nice look. This is definitely not the most versatile palette. You're going to get a green look. It's going to be a deep green or a light green look, but it's going to be a green look, which is why this kind of falls a little bit lower on my ranking scheme, because I do like having palettes where I can create multiple looks. Like, it would have been nice if there was like a gold in here, and I get it, the BH ice cream line is a set of monochromatic palettes, so I don't know why I thought I would get anything different. But it would have been nice to have something else to mix in with that, because I don't typically just do monochromatic looks. That's not my vibe. I don't like going for like just, I'm doing all green today. Like, I like to mix it up, and with this I would have to reach into another palette to get a different shade. Like, I would love to use that sort of dark green and then put like a nice gold in the middle for halo eye, but I would have to reach into another palette for that gold. Okay, coming in at number 9 is the Pink Crush Cosmetics Fairy Tales palette. This is actually really pretty, and this was gifted to me by the brand. I really like the packaging on this. It feels really nice for some reason. And this is a stunning palette. Like, it's so pretty. What I like about this is that you really get a bunch of looks with this. So it definitely is a very heavy pink purple palette. So if you like pink purple, you're gonna love this. But you do get a really nice green shade, which does shake things up a little bit and gives it a little bit more versatility. And the fairy shade here is almost like a orange peachy shade. So I think that this was a nice palette. What I was a little bit disappointed by is that the shimmers in this are definitely a lot less intense than some other indie brands. Now, don't get me wrong, they perform really well. You can get a really nice look. But when it comes to indie makeup, I oftentimes think about it as being super high shine, super sparkly. And this one didn't give me that. It wasn't bad by any means. Like, I created 3 or 4 like really nice looks with this palette, and you are able to kind of like mix the colors and get very different looks, which I appreciated. But I felt like the shimmers did not perform the best, and the mattes were just okay. Coming in at number 8 is another palette that was gifted to me, and this is the Nomad Cosmetics Paradise Islands palette. Now, this was one that I was going to buy anyways because I absolutely love the Nomad formula, and this is no different. It's the same good Nomad formula that we all love. What I liked about this palette is that these shades tended to be kind of like pastels for my complexion. However, there are some of these lighter shades that don't show up that well on my skin tone. So the shade Sky and the shade Mana, definitely you had to work with them a little bit. Sky didn't show up at all. But Mana, you kind of had to pack it on there to get it to show up. This row of shades did work really well though. So these kind of like green blue shades worked really well. One of the issues that I did see though was that the blue shades kind of all blended together. And I don't know if it's because of my skin tone. Oftentimes blue or tealy shades end up always looking the same, especially sort of blue-green shades, and they all kind of blend together and end up looking the same. So that was a little bit of a struggle. With this palette, I did have to work a little harder than I usually do when it comes to Nomad palettes, and that is because, like I said, the shades in here are definitely more pastel, a little bit more light. It's definitely more powdery than the typical Nomad formula, in my opinion. So it took a little bit more work, but at the end of the day, the looks was stunning, absolutely beautiful. And I was really able to create some nice, almost like pastel looks with this palette, which is something that's kind of hard to do when you are a deeper complexion. Pastels can look real ashy on you and just be gray casket ready. But I think that these are nice. Like, it's ranking a little bit lower too, because when it comes to this color story, like, you could only create colorful looks. Like, there is no neutral option in here, not a one. So you have no choice but to create a colorful look, which means that I am really only going to reach for this when I want a very specific look. So it's definitely not going to get a lot of use in my collection. Coming in at number 7 is the Cult palette from Spellbound Beauty. Now this is another indie brand that I discovered through Makeup Release Radar. Make sure you're following her on Instagram. Love, love, love Makeup Release Radar. You get all of the best releases for indie makeup, and she has a ton of discount codes. So you guys know I love a good sale, so make sure you're following her. And this is a real grunge color story, and this really appealed to me because of how grungy it is. It also does lean a little bit cool toned, if you could tell, and I was blown away by this palette. When I first got this, I was a little bit disappointed because if you look at it, you can see that the shimmers here look a little bit lackluster. It doesn't look like it's going to show up that well. It doesn't look like it's going to be like super wet or high impact. But baby, I will link my first impressions video because my reaction in using this palette in that video is literally the same reaction I've had every time I've used this palette, and I love it. I feel like it's just one of those kind of like nondescript palettes where it's like, I don't think this is going to be anything special, but it's one that I really like reaching for because I get really cool sort of neutral looks that I enjoy. I've worn this out. Like, it's a palette that I would feel comfortable wearing in like social settings because I've said this a couple of times, but I don't really wear bold makeup outside. Like, that's just not me. If I'm going out to happy hour or if I'm going out to dinner, I want a very simple look. Nothing too over the top because I find that it can be really distracting. So this is one that I think creates a really nice simple look. These shimmers are definitely a little bit more satin, but I think it's great if you have textured lids or if you are worried about it being too over the top and sparkly. I think you'd really enjoy this. The shade Cold is like a blue purple gray, which I think is really unique. I have never seen anything like it. The only thing that I would flag is that these two green shades here definitely blend into the same shade. So it's kind of a dud to have two of the same shades, but it's not bad. And the black is definitely not the blackest black, but I think that it's a good black because it's not too deep where if you apply it to another shade, it can go really dark and really, you know, smoky too quickly. I think that it's nice because you can really build up that blackness to get it to however you want it to be, which I prefer. I'm definitely not somebody that likes going in like with too much color because that's just too much impact right off the jump. Coming in at number 6 was another new to me brand, another indie brand, and that is the Adept Cosmetics Night Flower palette. Now this was really pretty. I love that Adept's palettes has the little holes so you can pop them out and rearrange them. And the color story in this literally like had me drooling at the mouth. Like, I was so impressed by this color story. I really wanted to pick it up. And I will say that I like the looks that I was able to create with this. I I wasn't really sold on this palette for a couple of reasons. The mattes, I think, worked really well. I think they blended really easy, but they are very, very powdery, as in like the slightest touch had a ton of kick up, so you always had to tap off your brush and then go in. But I had no issues of blending or anything. The shimmers are definitely shimmers that have a little bit of texture to them, and they're definitely ones that you have to let settle. So when I applied the shimmers to my eyes, I felt like my eyes looked a little bit textury, but then by the time I was done applying the rest of my makeup and the makeup had settled a little bit, I was like, okay, I see it. I see the vision, and it definitely sunk in really nicely. I expected this shade to show up a little bit differently on me, and whenever I put that shade next to another shade, it kind of just took the shade of that whatever shade that was. So I was a little bit disappointed in how that shade applied. But overall, I think that this was a really good palette. I think it was a nice intro to Lethal Cosmetics as a brand. Is it going to be my favorite formula? Honestly, I wasn't blown away at first like swatch or first application. I did use it multiple times, and I love the looks that I came up with. And like I said, the more it wore, the better I thought it looked. So doesn't turn me off from the brand, but I think it's a formula that I have to like grow into loving because I didn't love it at first like application. Coming in at number 5 was one that I don't know what inspired me to pick this up, but I'm so glad I did because it has literally stolen my heart, and this is the Stila Camouflage palette. I picked this up at TJ Maxx. Like, this is a teeny tiniest palette, and I had like littlest expectations for this, but I thought the color story was cute. I thought it looked really, really pretty. I thought all of the shades would work well for me. Like, even the lighter shades would be great sort of transition blending out shades, and they show up really nicely on my skin, every single shade. But the shimmers, baby. When I put this on my eyes, if you like green eyeshadow, if you like olive eyeshadow, if you love gold and green together, this is a palette for you. And this was $9.99 at TJ Maxx. It was a little bit up there for the size of this palette, but honestly, the quality and the performance of this palette is everything. So you do get that sort of deep, grungy green. This is a dark brown, but it has like gold flecks in there. You get a typical gold shade. You get this kind of like cool tone gray, and this is like a blue-green shade. So even though this palette is camouflage and you're thinking green and almost like camel orangey shades, there's so much versatility in this because of the different shades that you get, especially the different shimmers. And I loved the way this looked on me, and this is a palette that I am like blown away by. It is a palette that I fell in love with upon first application. I didn't expect to, but loved it. Coming in at number 4, we have the Pat McGrath Celestial Odyssey Luxe Quad in Deep Space Divinity. So this was one from her holiday collection that I picked up. It's a nice quad. Like, when it comes to Patricia, like you cannot contest her quality. So at the end of the day, this is Pat's top-notch quality. But it's not necessarily a palette that I feel super inspired by or interested in reaching for. One of the issues that I think a lot of people found with this palette is that it only has one shade, and it's this deep sort of rich burgundy brown red. And while Pat's shades do blend out really nicely in that you can get that really dark, opaque red shade, you can blend it out to get like a transition shade as well. I wish there was like another matte. It would have been nice to have like a lighter matte, but then we would have had to give it up a shimmer. So there's that. But that being said, these do pair really nicely together. This shade here is a duochrome, so it does have a blue reddish flip to it, which makes it, you know, match really well with the deep red shade. And then you have 2 gold shades here. So you have like that regular kind of like standard gold that Pat always has. And this is almost like a inner corner highlight shade, like a champagne type gold. So, and this one is definitely more of a satin shimmer, whereas this is more of a chunky shimmer. So one of the saving graces of this palette is that you do get a lot of versatility in there. So you have the duochrome shade, which you can obviously pair with the matte, but then you can also do like a really nice halo eye using this as the outer part and then popping in any one of the 2 sort of gold shades, or you can use the matte shade and then just kind of like stick with one of these golds as your lid shade. So you can get a little bit of color by adding this blue shade, but you can also keep it really neutral by sticking to these 2 gold shades. So it definitely has a lot of versatility, even though it's not a palette that I think about reaching for when I think about Pat's collection or my Patricia collection. It is really, really nice. So it has to rank a little bit higher because maybe I'm just a little Patricia biased, maybe. Coming in at number 3 is the Adept Cosmetics Ninhydrin palette. I have had this for an embarrassing amount of time before I really dug into it. This is such a beautiful color story. When it comes to Adept, like, you're really buying it for the shimmers. And I've had to, like, come to that realization because I have another Adept palette that I'm just confused by, the Kodan, because I don't know how to use it because the mattes are, like, pink and green. And then pairing those mattes with the shimmers, it's like, could I have gotten a brown? Just a black? Even like a peachy beige? Something. So what makes this palette really nice is that we do get browns. So the two matte shades, this brown and this brown, both of them are cool toned leaning browns, but they pair really nicely together. And they actually work well with all of the shimmers. So one of the issues that I've had with Adept is because their palettes are very shimmer heavy, like, you have to use whatever mattes that are in there and then pair it with the shimmers. But I feel like these two actually do work for all of the shimmers. What's nice about this is that you do get multiple shades. So you get some greens, you get some purples, and then you get some blues. This is like a pinkish shade, and then you have some more goldy shades. Now, these are definitely, most of them are duochromes or multichromes, so they have really strong shifts to them, which gives this palette just a huge edge to it. When it comes to the Adept formula as well, I think it does take a little bit of a learning curve. Some of these shimmers are quite creamy, some of these are quite chunky and, you know, very much flaky and tend to fall apart. So you kind of have to figure out which shimmer is which and then modify your application technique to suit. I'm not a huge fan of the chunky shimmers because I do think that they emphasize texture on the lids and they're just a little bit harsh. But what I've also come to figure out with this palette and with a lot of the palettes that have those kind of textured shadows is that what you need to do, here's a tip, is that you apply the shadows onto the lid, finish the rest of your face, and by the time you're done, the shadows have kind of like sit and settled. And that makes it look better. Because upon first application, it does look really harsh. It does look like it's emphasizing texture. But I feel like by the time you're done applying all of your makeup, it kind of like settles into the face. And you really get to the point where it's like, okay, this is what the shadow is going to look like. And this is how it's going to wear. So that's what I figure out when it comes to using like the Adept shadows as well as more textured shadows. They do have some more creamy ones, which I appreciate as well. But overall, I think that this color story is amazing. You get so many different shades and so many different textures that it's such a good one to have in your collection. Okay, we're down to the last two. And coming in at number 2 is the Sigil Inspired Peak Up Palette. You guys already know that this brand, we can't purchase from it because of the Russia-Ukraine war. So if you don't have this palette, you won't be able to purchase it. But this baby is so beautiful. Now, it's a very jewel toned palette, which means that you can get these shades elsewhere, but it's so pretty. There's just something about the Sigil inspired quality that I can't describe. This shade is a multi-chrome, so I don't know if you can see the shifts that it has, and that is one of my favorite shades in this palette. It has like this green, red, purple shift. Stunning. And this blue is one of the most vibrant blues that I have ever seen. Like, this palette is just beautiful in terms of the color story, but this color story is replicable. What gives this the biggest edge is the formula. I don't know what kind of voodoo magic is in here, but I have never seen a formula like this since Mcgrath, where I was like, whoa, I didn't know shadows could be made like this. So it's really sad that we can't purchase from the brand. It's really sad that we don't know what's going to happen, because the quality of the shadow is phenomenal. Like, I can't say enough about how inspired I feel by, you know, the palettes that I have from the brand, but also how easy and blendable the shadows are, and the level of pigmentation that they have is just amazing. And they wear really nicely too. They don't fade. I didn't experience any sort of issues with it throughout the day when I wore that palette. And lastly, coming in at number 1 is another palette that is new to my brand, new to my collection, and another brand that's new to my collection, the Fantasy Cosmetics Druid palette. This is one that I tried to refuse and I couldn't, and I had to end up buying it. I actually ended up buying 2, and I did include one in a giveaway. And this is such a beautiful palette. It does have a couple duochromes in there, and I believe 1 multi-chrome, but the performance of this palette, amazing. The mattes actually worked really well, and I was quite surprised by that. What I've come to realize is that a lot of indie brands, oftentimes they have really, really good shimmers, but the mattes are kind of meh or bad. This one, the mattes were really good. The biggest issue that I had with these is that the 2 brown shades here are pretty much the exact same shade. One is just a little bit more neutral, one is just a little bit more red, but on the eyes, it's very, very hard to tell the difference between the two. So I wish there was a lighter brown in here, especially because as someone with a deeper complexion, these work for me, but I could imagine someone who is lighter than me that's like, I don't have a transition shade because these 2 are too dark, and this would be their only transition shade. So I wish there was a lighter brown in there for, you know, transition shades or even just as a blending out shade. The other issue that this palette had is that this shade is really, really tightly packed. So it's actually kind of hard to pick up the shade to apply it onto the lids. But once you get it up, amazing. So I know I just mentioned a couple of issues with the palette, but this is so freaking pretty on the eyes. The quality, the performance, everything, the different looks that you're able to get, that I'm able to look past that very, very minor issue and use this because it's that good. It really is that good. Now, this was the first launch from the brand, and I think that they have set themselves up so nicely, and I can't wait to see what else they come up with because this color story is beautiful. It's definitely more fall, in my opinion, so it would be nice to see if they come up with something that's a little bit more summer-ish for folks like myself, because this is, I love it. I don't know what else to say. Alright, so that was my ranking of the last 10 eyeshadow palettes that I tried. Like I said, I have a lot more that I've been working through, but I didn't want to do like a full giant video, and those I've only been able to test like 1 or 2 times. What I'm trying to do with these sort of ranking videos is to make sure that I've really, really tested these palettes. Like, I'm not just reviewing them once and then coming back and ranking them. Like, I've been playing in these a couple of times, so I have like really fully formed opinions on them before I do these rankings. But there'll be another one soon because there's so many more palettes that I have been working through. Y'all already saw my basket of shame. So you know that there's a bunch of palettes in my basket of shame. I've been working through them. I've been doing good. So there'll be another ranking video coming soon. If you were curious about this look, I probably should have said this at the start. This is pretty much all House Labs with the exception of the complexion products, i.e. the foundation and concealer, but pretty much all House Labs. I will have a video up on that either before or after this one. If it's before, I will link it in the description box below, so make sure to check that out. Alright, if you like this video, if you enjoyed this ranking, don't forget to hit that like button. If you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe and join the family. I love having you guys join. I love having you guys come back, and I am so appreciative of all of the support that I've gotten so far on this journey. Leave a comment down below letting me know which of the palettes I talked about is your favorite, which ones you've tried, which ones you're interested in trying, you know, the whole shebang. As always, I love you guys so very, very much. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you in my next one. Bye!